Hey everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going over all the books I read in January. I'm super excited to be back in the car filming with y'all. You know, I like to do my wrap-ups in the car. I haven't done one in the car for a while because I think I combined November and December and did a tier ranker. So I don't think I filmed one in my car since October, which it's been a while. And I really do love filming in my car for these videos. Sorry if the lighting's a little I never film at this time of day and there's like no clouds. So it's very, very sunny outside. And so I'm just making do with what I got. I read some pretty good books this month overall, and I feel like I read some of them so long ago. I'm like, do I even remember what they're about? Like, I read them so long ago, even though it was just the beginning of January. January felt so long, but also went by so fast at the same time. Like, I can't believe it's February of 2024, but January also went by super slow for me. I don't know how else to explain it, but I have my computer right here. Y'all can't see, but my computer tablet. So we are going to go over my stats for the month. So I read 14 books. None of those are rereads or DNFs, and 4 of those are by BIPOC authors. And I wish that I read more books by BIPOC authors this month, because 4 out of 14 is like pretty low for me. But I think because I had other people choosing my TBR for part of this reading vlog, that I think because I did a reading vlog where basically my TBR was chosen by other people, I think maybe that's why it was so low. But I still did read 4, which I'm proud of. I read 4,678 pages. For genres, I read 1 fantasy, 1 fantasy romance, 5 horror, 2 mystery, 3 romance, 1 sci-fi, and 1 thriller. So genres kind of all over the board. I guess again because people chose my TBR for me for one of my reading vlogs I did this month, which I did do 2 reading vlogs. I did a Winterween reading vlog and I did a Reading Booktuber's Best Books of the Year reading vlog, and that one there's an extended edition on my Patreon. So I read I think 4 books for Winterween, and then I read 5 books for the Best Books, including the 2 that were in the extended edition. And then I read 6 audiobooks and 8 hybrid books. I read 13 books that were for adult audiences and 1 new adult. Then for ratings, I gave out 1 2.5, 1 3-star, 3 3.5, 5 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 2 5 stars. And then I read 13 novels and 1 novella. And for author status, I read 1 debut, 8 new to me, and 5 repeat authors. So those are all my stats for the month, and now we're going to get into the books, and I organize this by going from my lowest rated books to my highest rated books. So my lowest rated book at 2.5 stars was The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. This one was okay for me. It's in my Winterween vlog, so if you want all of my thoughts, that'll be linked up in the cards, and if you just click on my channel, it's like right there. So yeah, I give this one 2.5 stars, which I know is kind of like unpopular. I feel like people either really hate this or really love it, and I just kind of felt like in the middle. I thought this was an okay book. I don't want to get too much into this book because it's very spoilery, like anything that you talk about this book. Basically, this one follows this boarded up house at the end of Needless Street. So we get 3 different perspectives throughout this, actually kind of like 4, but it talks about 3 in the synopsis. We get one that is a girl who isn't allowed to leave the house or go outside. Then we follow a man, and he's just like an average day white man who is like an alcoholic. And then we follow a cat who is very religious. And so we follow all their perspectives as they're in this house. And we also follow this new neighbor who moves in next door, and she kind of has like a past and history, and she's there for a reason. So that's basically what this book is about. But I thought it was just okay because it has this mental health representation that was not my absolute favorite in it. I just don't know how I feel about it still. I have very mixed feelings about this book, so that's why I gave it 2.5 stars, because there were some parts of it that I liked, and then a lot of it I thought was really boring, and I thought it dragged a lot, and it also had some representation that is very like questionable. I know the author had really good intentions with the representation, but I don't know like if it's the best because it was like a twist. So I don't think the representation in itself was bad, but I think that it being used as a twist in itself was kind of negative, and I don't really enjoy that a ton. So I gave this one 2.5 stars. Overall, it was pretty okay. I really enjoyed the perspective of the neighbor next door. We get her perspective and like what's going on with her and why she's there, and I really liked that a lot. but a lot of the other parts of this book were not the best. Honestly, I should probably lower this one down to a 2, because the more that I think about it, the more the negatives outweigh the positives. So this one's like a 2.5. Next up was my 3-star of the month, and that one is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. This one I read for the Booktuber's Best Books of the Year video, but it was in the extended version that's on Patreon, so most people probably didn't see my thoughts on this one. But this one I gave 3-star because it literally is not in my brain at all. We follow a man, and he is kind of like isolated from his family, but they demand that he comes on like this trip with them. And when they are on this trip, somebody turns up dead, and they don't know who this person is. They didn't seem to be like a resident of like where they're staying at, so they're like very confused on who this man is. And our main character decides that he's gonna try and solve the murder himself, which this one was just, again, okay for me. I thought it was fine. I really enjoyed the writing. The writing is very satirical. It breaks the fourth wall a lot, and I actually really enjoyed the writing a lot. But I was really bored with like the perspective of just like this white man like trying to solve this crime. I was like, okay. And the family dynamics, I think the author thought they were juicier than they actually were. Like, they weren't that juicy. It was like, okay. We do find out how everybody in the family has killed somebody, and we get like their chapters, kind of like, it'll be like chapter about the wife, chapter about the mother, chapter about this person, that person. So like that was kind of intriguing that we did find out why and how everybody has killed somebody. But at the same time, I was just very bored throughout this story. I thought it was really not intriguing for it being like a murder mystery. I thought it was just like really boring. I don't know how else to describe it. And again, it's like really not in my brain up here. It was one of those books that I read it and immediately forgot what it even is about. Like, I'm surprised I was able to give y'all a synopsis because it was just that forgettable for me. Next, we're moving on to my 3.5 stars. So all of these books now on, I recommend. The other two, I don't really recommend, but 3.5 and above, I recommend. So the first one up is Mary by Nat Cassidy, and this was actually my Patreon book club pick for December. And I read this one at the beginning of January because I thought it could potentially be a favorite of the year, and I didn't want to read it after I already made my favorites video. Obviously, it was not, because I gave it 3.5 stars. We follow this woman, Mary, and she is perimenopausal, so she is literally going through menopause. So she actually moves back to her hometown to help out, I believe, her aunt. And while she's there, she starts having some visions that are kind of related to menopause, but also they are visions of like a serial killer, like his kind of mind. So she's grappling with this, not just menopause, but also the fact that she's literally having visions of a serial killer, and like, why is this going on? And she's starting to like auto write and like do weird stuff like that. So like, is she possessed? Like, what's going on? And so that's really what this book follows, and I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was really well done, the menopause part of it, but I wish that we honestly had like more of the menopause. There's kind of like a way that this book goes towards the end that I can't talk about because it's spoilery, but that like wasn't my favorite. And I normally really love that trope. It's a very hated trope. Like, people hate this trope, and I normally really like it, but in this book it just wasn't my favorite, and I feel like it didn't really connect to the menopause in the way that I wanted it to. I really wanted this story about this woman going through menopause, and we do get that as well, and I thought what we did get was well done, but I just wanted more of it because it just felt like it was part of it, but it wasn't the main part, and I wanted it to be the main part. And also, what I really enjoyed about this one is I've actually read Carrie by Stephen King, and you can tell that the author took a lot of inspiration from that story. So I really loved seeing those kind of tie-ins and seeing all these little drops of Carrie in this. And like, you do kind of get like that mixed media towards the end. You do get like this person that's going through a really big change in their body, and it is like a man writing about a woman's experience. And so those are very similar in that way, and I really enjoyed those kind of little droplets. I thought it was done really well in that regard. But again, I just wish that the menopause was more part of the story, and I wish that we did not get that last little twist of what was going on. I didn't really enjoy that a ton. So 3.5 stars for this one. I still recommend it, and I think a lot of people could really enjoy this one. Next up is Moon of the Crusted Snow, and this one's actually in my Winterween reading vlog, so I'm not going to talk too much on this one, but this one follows a community of Indigenous people in, I believe, Canada, and it is very snowy there. So I'm pretty sure it's Canada, but I'm not 100% sure. It might be like Northern America. So we follow this community, and we see kind of the ways that they have changed changed, and it talks a lot about that, about how there was these very traditional ways of doing things, and now there is more of like a different way that people do things with a lot more technology and stuff like that. So we're seeing how the community has adapted, but how they also kept certain traditions as well. But then the power grid starts to go down, and they're relying on like the little that they do have related to like gasoline and stuff like that, and they get like a lot of trucks and shipments in, but those also stop. So they're kind of confused on what's going on. Turns out it's literally the apocalypse, so they are trying their best to survive. And this one was actually like a much slower story than I anticipated. It was much more like character driven and just kind of following these people. But also, I forgot to mention that there are people from the south that start to come up and ask for their help and assistance, and they're kind of wary to help these people, especially because like it's kind of reminiscent of when like obviously colonizers came to the Americas, and they were like basically asking for help, but then literally killed off and treated the indigenous people like shit. So it's very reminiscent of that, and I really enjoyed those conversations. I thought it was done extremely well. And this story, while it was more character driven and slower, which I can really enjoy, this one just wasn't my favorite. And I think honestly it's because I don't like apocalyptic stories. I know this. I read a couple of them, and generally they always get like a 3-star from me, or like a 3.5, because I just don't really enjoy the apocalypse. But I did really enjoy the conversations that were had in this one. I thought it was extremely well done, and I think a lot of people could really love this one, especially if you like more character driven, slower stories. I think that this one is an excellent one to definitely go into, get a lot of perspective, and understand a lot more about this specific group of indigenous people and how they were impacted by white people and technology and everything like that. I thought it was extremely well done, so I highly recommend this one, even though I only gave it 3.5 stars. So my last 3.5 star was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Sorry there's like a glare because of the sun, but this one I gave 3.5 stars, and I read this one for my Booktuber's Best Books of the Year video, so if you want more thoughts on this one, you could check that one out. But this one was honestly really good as well. All of my 3.5 stars were really good, and I recommend them. They just, for some reason or another, did not personally click with me the way that I wanted them to click with me. So this one follows a man named Ryland, and he is basically a teacher, and he goes on this mission, and we don't really know why in the beginning, why he went on this mission, what he's there to do, but he is the sole survivor. The other two people that were with him are dead, and he wakes up, he has complete amnesia, he doesn't even remember why he's there, but he is actually supposed to save the planet. So he is on this mission that he doesn't even know that he's on, and he's slowly starting to figure out why he's there, and slowly beginning to try and figure out what he can actually do. And he's all alone, but is he? And that's like the big thing about this book that you can't really talk about, is like that part. But it does say that in the synopsis. It says he's got to do it all alone, or does he? And so you kind of are wondering like who is there with him, and that is like what the main chunk of this story is about. And so I can't really talk about it because it's very spoilery, but there is some other characters in this, and it's very much like a found family story, which I thought that I would enjoy more. And I really love science in books, especially like horror. I love science and horror, so I thought that this one was going to be one that I really love, because a lot of my friends who don't even read sci-fi really love this one. So I thought, you know, of course it has a lot of science in it, but it's more like this found family story, and a lot of my friends really love this one, so I thought that I would really love it too. But I feel like the science actually bogged down the story a lot. I appreciated it being there, but I feel like it was kind of like too much, if that makes sense. It was a little too much, and this book, I feel like it definitely did not need to be this long. I know it doesn't look super long, but it is like almost 500 pages. Yeah, it's almost 500 pages, and I feel like it definitely could have been cut down to like 350. I don't know if that's just me, but I feel like it could have been like just edited down a little bit, and I feel like that would have like picked up the pace a little bit, if that makes sense. Even though this is like a slower, more character driven story, again, I feel like there is definitely stuff going on, and I feel like if this book was cut down a little bit, that it could have been a more enjoyable read. But that's just me. I did really enjoy like the found family elements in this. I enjoyed that so much. So that's why I had to give it 3.5, because I loved those elements so much. I thought it was done so well, and I feel like I keep saying that for all these books, but really the authors that I read this month, they know how to write. They're really good writers, so I really enjoyed this one a lot. but something about it just did not really click with me. Like, I enjoyed the found family, but I know some people, they like cry over this book, they get super emotional, and that didn't happen to me, and that's what I wanted to happen. So I would think I was just like a little disappointed that I wasn't as emotionally attached to the story as I thought that I would be. So I'm going to be moving on to my 4 stars now, and so my first four star is My Darkest Prayer by S.A. Cosby, and this is actually S.A. Cosby's debut, and this is the last book of his that I needed to read his entire backlist. He has 4 published works to date, and this one follows a man, and he basically handles bodies, okay? Like, that is his main job in this city, is to handle bodies in like a lot of different ways and aspects. But this main plot is kicked off because a pastor was found dead, and his parish believes that there was actually kind of some sketchy stuff going on with his death, and does not believe that he just like died naturally, and they think that he was definitely like killed or something like that. So they ask this main character who handles bodies frequently if he will look into the death of this pastor, and he basically says in here that he navigates the murky waters of small town corruption even as dark secrets of his own threaten to come to the surface. And S.A. Cosby knows how to write, okay? He is such a phenomenal author, and he really knows how to get you attached to characters and make you really feel for them and their lives and their story. This is my least favorite of his work, but I still really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed like this, again, small town corruption. I thought that was done really well, and I know he knows how to do that because my favorite book from him has to do with like a small town corruption as well, which is All the Sinners Bleed. So I feel like this one was kind of like, you could see that kind of skill starting to develop of him learning how to do small town corruption, and it was still really good in here, but you see how his craft has developed over the years for sure. This kind of small town religious element I also really enjoyed. I find that really interesting. I really enjoyed Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead because of that as well. I love like learning about these small town religious communities because I didn't grow up in a small town, or really like a super religious town, I would say, and so I just really enjoy seeing that because that wasn't really my experience, even though I did grow up in a religious community for part of my childhood. So I really just like find it cathartic to see that a lot. And again, S.A. Cosby really knows how to get you attached to characters, to really feel for them and their life and their story. But he also writes really action-packed stories that have a lot going on. And I feel like this one definitely was like all of that combined into one. But you can see that like this is the start of his career, and his craft is not as perfected as it is in all the rest of his books. Next up, I read Cackle, which is another 4-star that I read for Winterween, and this is one that I really enjoyed a lot, and I would highly recommend this one. I did enjoy Black Sheep more by this author, but I thought Cackle was so well done. So we follow Annie, and she went through a really hard breakup recently, so she decides to move to this small town, and she absolutely loves it. She thinks the town is so picturesque, like think like Gilmore Girls type small town. Like it's just super close knit and amazing, and she's like loving her apartment, except there's kind of like this weird spider infestation, but she doesn't really know like why that is. And she meets this woman named Sophie and is like immediately drawn to her. She's super magnetic, and she really wants to teach Annie how to live her life for herself and not for other people, like how she was in the past. And the rest of the town honestly seems a little afraid of Sophie, and she's not sure why that is, but she is like enamored by Sophie. And so this book kind of follows Annie and Sophie's relationship, and also how Annie is basically coming into her own. This is a coming of age story for adults, which I really loved. I thought that was like such an interesting concept, and I've never read a coming of age story done this well for adults. I thought it was just so phenomenal because it's so real. And this a lot of people market this as cozy horror, but I know that Haley said that the author really does not like that, because this book is actually supposed to not be cozy. There's literal scenes of like her going on dates with different men and finding out that they're like misogynist, and then you're grappling with the fact that you're sitting across the table from a literal misogynist, and her just slowly realizing that all these things in her life are kind of not serving her, and she comes to these terms and tries to become her own person, but she's doing that with the help of Sophie, who may or may not be a witch. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one a lot, and I thought it was super well done, and I love that it was a coming of age story basically for adults, because I'm now to that place where I'm an adult. So and I still don't know really who I am, what I'm doing. I'm just here, okay? Next up for 4 stars, one that I read for my best booktubers best books of the year video, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarrow. Sorry for the glare again. But this one I really enjoyed a lot. We basically follow a woman who wanted to enter into the scribe quadrant, but her mother is a general and forces her to enter into the writer's quadrant. She goes to this elite war college and she enters into the writer's quadrant, which is super like hard. I basically was thinking about Dauntless the entire time that I was reading this from Divergent. Like, you know how they're like jumping on and off trains and like doing a lot of like really dangerous things, and their initiation is much more difficult than all the other ones, or at least more deadly, I should say. And so that's like kind of what I was picturing throughout this entire story, is it's very deadly in that sense. And so basically the writers in this are training to be writers of dragons, and then they go through this process where they basically like pair up with a dragon, possibly getting killed by the dragons, but they basically pair up with dragons. The dragons can like talk in their head and everything like that, so that's like really interesting. I enjoyed that aspect a lot of it, of like the dragons talking in people's head. And this is a fantasy romance, so she was actually told by her sister to stay away from this guy Xaden because his family was like killed by, I believe, our main character's mother, like on her order, and he's actually one of the wing leaders of the writer's quadrant, but she is obviously very much drawn to him, and basically it's their romance in this fantasy college. And I really enjoyed this one a lot. I thought it was just really fun. It was just a really, really fun time, and I don't really have much negative to say about it. I really enjoyed the romance in this. And our main character Violet, she actually has like a chronic illness, and her pain, she goes through like chronic pain, and she has a lot of issues with like her bones and stuff like that makes her a little bit like weaker than the other people in the quadrant. So yeah, but she learns how to adapt and make everything her own, and people help her adapt and bring different things to help her, but she basically just learns how to adapt and come into her own a little bit. And I really just thought this one was just really fun, as I said. And I don't know if I'll continue on in the series because I've heard really bad things about Iron Flame, but this did kind of leave off on like a bit of a cliffhanger, so I do kind of want to continue on. But I really just like love the dragons in this, and they became like main characters in the story, and I love that perspective, or I love that idea like so much. Like, they had their own dialogue, their own personalities, and they like had such a connection with our characters. I just love that so much. And if you're just looking for like a fun little fantasy and you haven't really read fantasy in a while, or if you do like fantasy but you just want something that has kind of like reminiscent of a lot of different things all combined into one, I would definitely recommend this one. Next up is Holding by Alexandria House, and this is the second book in the St. Louis Sire series, which is a black hockey romance series. There's only 2 books out so far. I loved Goals so much. It was literally on my favorites of the year, and I really liked Holding as well. It had one element of it that I didn't enjoy as much, which I will talk about. But this is basically just like a second chance romance that is a hockey black romance. That's all that you really need to know about it to go into it. And I really enjoyed our main characters a lot. They're actually childhood enemies to friends to lovers, and then now it's like a second chance romance where they like got a divorce and like now they're coming back. So they've gone through a lot. Like, you follow their perspectives from childhood all the way until present day, and so you see how they have basically gone through the ups and downs of their relationship and how the relationship was so crafted and built over time. And I love that so much. Like, I loved seeing them from the time that they were literally children to now, and like their relationship, it was just so beautiful. Their relationship, the reason that I gave this one 4 stars and not like a 4.5 or a 5 star is because the main character in this, the main female character, she struggles with bipolar disorder, which I also have. I have bipolar 2. I know that I don't really talk about it on my channel, and it's not because I'm like ashamed of it or anything like that. It's just simply because it just like doesn't come up. I've never really read a book with bipolar representation before, and this one had it, and I just really wasn't a fan of the representation in here. I'm not saying that it's not realistic for some people. I don't know that many other people with bipolar. I literally only know my sister and myself and my uncle, because it is kind of like a genetic thing. So like people in my family have it, but this one made it seem like bipolar, like you're literally like insane, like you need to be locked up low key or like be on medication for your entire life, like you're just unstable. And I don't find that to always be like the most realistic. Obviously there are extreme cases with everything, but I just felt like it was a very extreme case, and I wish that we had more like realistic representation and not like her like having these more extreme versions of the mental illness, because of course there's going to be people who do, but I wish that we just had more of like a girl who just like had bipolar and just existed with it but still like went about her life. And she did go about her life, but also like she was literally told that she could never go off medication throughout her entire life, and I feel like that's like very unrealistic, because obviously if you have coping mechanisms you're able to regulate yourself to a certain extent, and not everybody needs medication. So I feel like that was just like a little unrealistic and like was doing the most extreme. For me, never reading bipolar representation, I feel like this one was not the most realistic version of that, and I wish I had a more realistic version for my first real representation. Next up is my Patreon book club pick for January that I read, and that is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf. I gave this one 4 stars as well, and this one basically follows a woman named Wiley. I always want to say Riley. Sorry, the train is popping off right now. But we follow Wiley, and she is a true crime writer who goes to this very small house in the middle of winter to write one of her books. And honestly, she thinks this house would be perfect, except for the fact that 2 people were literally murdered in cold blood and a girl disappeared without a trace earlier. And as the storm gets worse, she also discovers a child outside. And I have a whole reading vlog for this up on my Patreon, and we're doing a live show on the 5th, which this should be going up before that. I'm not 100% sure if it will, but we're doing a live show for this on the 5th of February. So I'm excited to really discuss this one, because we honestly actually do get multiple perspectives and timelines throughout this book, which I really enjoyed. I thought it would be hard for me to follow, but I really enjoyed all the different perspectives, and I enjoyed the different timelines, because we also get a timeline in the past where we are finding out more about like why these people were murdered, how they were murdered, who they were, and who's this girl that disappeared. And I was really excited throughout reading this to see how that connected to our main plot line, and I loved how it connected actually. But I did predict a lot of the twists that were throughout this story, so they weren't really surprising to me. I thought this one was done really well. It is a really fun, fast-paced thriller, and while it does take place in the winter, and I think that you could like count this one as a seasonal read, it also like the past timeline takes place in August, and they're literally talking about the heat and like people turning on the heat and the AC not working and like stuff like that in the middle of summer. So like I feel like you could also read this at any time of year, but it is more like wintry. So I definitely think that this one's like a fun, fast-paced thriller if you're looking for something to read during the winter time, or just like any time of year and you just think the synopsis sounds interesting, because it is really interesting and it was a really good read. Now we're moving on to my 4.5 stars, and honestly both my 4.5 stars I'm debating on giving 5 stars because I love them that much. The first one that I read was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I loved this one. It was so good, and this one was also my booktuber's best books of the year video, so if you want more thoughts, again, you could check out that video. But this one follows our main character Emily Wilde, and she is working on this Encyclopedia of Fairies. She's literally in the academic field. She's a scholar, and this does take place more towards like the early 1900s, and so she is like one of the only women in her field at this time. So we do talk a lot about the misogyny and like how men get a lot more privileges and more kind of mess ups, I guess you could say, than women. So I found that really interesting. But we are following her as she's working on this encyclopedia, and she only has one last place to study before she can publish it. So she goes off there alone, and she is like in this very small town, and basically it is kind of like found family, because Emily is very like isolated. She likes to just be alone with like her books and stuff like that, but she does kind of get like a found family element throughout this story. Even though she's there all alone, one of her coworkers, who actually thinks that they're like the best of friends, but she does not like him at all, but she also recognizes that he's like her only friend, he is like, you shouldn't be there alone, and not out of like misogyny, more out of like nobody should be just in a random city alone. They do kind of have like a budding romance throughout this story. I wouldn't call it a fantasy romance though. It's more just about Emily and her exploration of like these fairies, and we get a lot of like talk about just like learning about these fairies, and also there is kind of like more action towards the end, but I don't really want to talk about it because again, like spoilers. But I really enjoyed the direction that this story took. I thought it was just so well done. I loved the writing, I loved all the characters, I loved the found family. This one is definitely like a perfect perfect cozy fantasy. Like, I would put it up there almost with The House in the Cerulean Sea. Like, it's like right below it. I think that this is like my second favorite one, so I might honestly bump it up to 5 stars because I loved her so much. And my other 4.5 star was also for my Reading Booktuber's Best Books of the Year video, but the extended version, and that is Butcher and Blackbird. This one is a serial killer romance, but it's actually like a comedy, a rom-com, but it is about serial killers. So it follows our main character, and she basically has a meet cute, which I don't know if I would call it that. She's literally locked in a cage after killing a serial killer, because both the main characters are serial killers that kill serial killers. She just killed a serial killer, and she's literally in a cage, and she's been in there for days, and this other man comes in, and he was actually going to kill the same serial killer that she just killed a couple days prior, and he releases her, but she was literally stuck with this dead body as it was rotting with no food, but she did have water, and that's like their little meet cute. And ever since then, they kind of had like this tension, this funny little banter tension that's going on, and they decide to hold this competition every year where they try to kill a serial killer and like who could kill them first. So that's like basically the plot of this story, but I loved the characters so much, and they had such good banter. Like, the banter in this one was off the charts. It was just so funny and comedic, and I just had such a good time reading this one. It definitely is like what it describes it as. It's literally like a rom-com with serial killers, and it has a lot of trigger warnings and stuff like that, and a lot of like different things like cannibalism that go on throughout this, but it's all done with a funny tone, which I really enjoyed. This one was just like such a fun, good time, and I just loved it so much. We're finally moving on to my 5 stars. The first 5 star that I had is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan, and this one I absolutely adored. This one is a second chance romance about another divorced couple. I actually tabbed this one up, which I haven't tabbed a book in a while. I don't think y'all can see it. There you go. This basically follows a divorced couple that went through a very traumatic experience, and they have a lot of trauma built up, but they have kind of gotten in this routine where they run this business together, this really successful restaurant, and they co-parent their kids really well, but they start to wonder if their relationship shouldn't have ended. And I just loved exploring like their trauma. This book is very like trauma heavy. They have a lot of trauma and a lot of things that they went through in the relationship that they didn't really sort out, and I just love that. And Kennedy Ryan knows how to write characters, and she knows how to write romance so well. They just had such chemistry. I completely understand where they're coming from in the beginning of this story, where they know that they weren't the best for each other, but they also are the best for each other. They just weren't the best for each other at that time. I think that this is just such a beautiful story and such a beautiful romance, and I just absolutely adored it. And I cannot wait for the second book, which follows one of our main characters' friends. So I cannot wait for that one, which comes out, I think, this month in February, I'm pretty sure, or in March. I'm not 100%. February or March it comes out, but I'm really excited for that one. And this one actually does have a character named Deja in it. It's actually the daughter of our main characters, and I loved seeing the children in this as well. I love children in romances. I know a lot of people hate children in books, but I love children in romances, and I loved seeing them like co-parent and deal with their children. And this book was just so beautiful, and it had so many amazing, beautiful quotes that I just had to tab, and it's just so stunning. Like, if you're looking for a good second chance romance, please pick this one up. And the last 5 star I had of the month was also for my winter reading vlog, and that is Crossroads by Laura Hightower. This one follows a woman who is really in the depths of grief, okay? She is really in it because her son was killed in a very tragic accident, but she one day goes back to like basically like where he was killed. They kind of have like a memorial site, and her finger gets pricked with blood, and after that night she's basically able to like see him and talk to him. So this one basically follows that, and it is a short little novella, so I don't want to talk too much into it, but this one literally did grief so well. I love grief horror, and seeing this woman and like how far she would go for her child is really like what the crux of this story is about. And I just thought it was done so beautifully, and you really see the extent of mother's love and like how far mothers would go for their children. And I just thought it was so beautiful, and I just adored it so much. So those are all the books that I read in January. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you made it to the end of this video, leave a little moon emoji down below, because that's like my favorite emoji, the little moon with the side eyes. That's literally my favorite emoji, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye everybody. I'm writing rhymes in the kitchen, soaking in moments we live in, yeah. You got the nerve to be on me.